In most Western cultures, death is taboo. It's something to be mourned, avoided, even feared. But some cultures have an entirely different outlook on death. The Toraja people of Indonesia have no fear of death. In fact, just the opposite. They live with the dead people for years and treat corpses like part of the family. The Taraja people live in the mountainous highland regions of the remote Indonesian island of Sulawesi. They existed there for centuries in isolation, having little contact with the outside world before 1906, when the Dutch first occupied Indonesia. The Taraja place tremendous importance on family relationships, and they live in small, tight-knit villages of mostly extended family members. Their villages are highly cooperative, with inhabitants helping each other farm, raise their families, build and repair their homes, and complete their spiritual rituals. After the arrival of the Dutch in the early 20th century, the native inhabitants of Indonesia, including the Taraja, were largely converted to Christianity, though they retained many of their ancient animist rituals and beliefs, blending these ancient practices with their new Christian faith. One of the most interesting ancient Taraja rituals that survives to this day is the practice of ancestor worship in their elaborate funeral rites. Rather than treat death as something to be feared and avoided, the Taraja embrace death with reverence, gratitude, and worship, and their love for their ancestors is stronger than their fear of death. They don't rely on modern medicine to keep ill people alive, and instead allow death to happen naturally. To the Taraja, death is not an ending or a goodbye. They believe that the dead never really leave us, and that the spirits of the dead continue to watch over and protect surviving family members as long as they've passed into the afterlife. The Taraja do not fear death, nor do they fear dead bodies. In fact, they live alongside them for weeks, months, or even years after death. The Taraja don't consider someone to be dead as long as their corpse remains at home. They are considered tomakula, a sick person, until their funeral has taken place, often weeks or even years after their death. Until then, the corpse remains a part of the family and is very much involved in the day-to-day life of surviving family members. The deceased loved ones will continue to live with the corpse until the funeral and will treat them much the same way they would have in life. When a family has a recently deceased loved one at home, they'll care for them as they would a sick person. At mealtimes, they'll present the deceased with full servings of rice, stewed meat, fish, and local fruit, and family members will take care to gently offer drinks to the corpse, as they would to an ill person, holding the cup up to their mouth and wiping away any spills. If the deceased was a smoker, family members will continue to offer them cigarettes, lighting them and placing them in the corpse's mouth. Every evening, the family will make sure to turn on the light in the deceased person's room so they can see what the family's doing around them. Family members will sit and visit with the dead person's corpse, talking to them and praying with them as if they were alive. The family will also take care to dress the deceased regularly in fresh clothes and will be sure to keep the corpse clean, wiping away any dirt or debris, removing bugs, and preserving the body with a solution of formaldehyde and water, eventually mummifying the corpse until the family can afford to hold an appropriate funeral. Terraja funerals are incredibly elaborate affairs. Only once a suitable amount of money has been raised and every single extended family member has been contacted and notified of the death of their loved one can the funeral and burial preparations truly begin. It can take years to plan and save for an elaborate Terraja funeral, and during this period the corpse is kept at home and treated as if they were simply sick, not dead. According to Jakob Kake, a Terraja cultural expert, how long a deceased loved one is kept at home depends on the family's status. Lower-class families may only keep their dead at home for mere weeks. Middle-class families may keep them around for months, and high-class families can keep their dead at home for years while they save and prepare for the elaborate funeral. The Rambu Solo funeral rites are an incredibly important part of Taraja culture and are an opportunity to showcase the status and importance of the deceased and their surviving family. These extravagant rites can be very costly, with families often going into debt to afford to give their deceased loved ones an appropriate funeral. It's not uncommon for lower and middle-class Taraja families to spend the equivalent of $50,000 on a loved one's funeral, and high-caste families have been known to spend $500,000 or more to ensure their loved ones are sent into the afterlife with appropriate pageantry. Taraja funerals usually take place in August or September and can last anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, depending on the deceased's importance and status. The family will erect a ceremonial site, called Arante, in an open field, building shelters for the audience and other ceremonial structures for the event. Taraja funerals are not intimate, private affairs. The entire village and every member of the deceased's extended family participate in the festivities. The funeral of an important person might be attended by thousands. Even total strangers are enthusiastically welcomed at the most sacred event for a Taraja family. In recent years, an influx of tourists have flooded these remote Indonesian communities, and it's considered a mark of the family's high status to have foreign tourists as guests at a Taraja funeral. During the funeral, relatives gather together to show how much the surviving family love and respect their deceased relative. For days, they'll engage in public displays of mourning, praying, weeping, and wailing for the deceased. But a Taraja funeral is not an overly sorrowful event. They'll also celebrate the life of the loved one with ritual dancing, chanting, and singing, and even ceremonial cockfights. The cornerstone of a Taraja funeral is the ritual sacrifice of the water buffalo. The Taraja people believe that the water buffalo is the vehicle to the afterlife, and that the more water buffalo a deceased person has to carry them into the afterlife, the faster and easier their journey will be. The more important or high status a deceased person was in life, the more water buffalo the family will buy to join them in death. A single water buffalo can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $40,000, and many families will go deeply into debt to ensure that their dead relative has as many buffalo as necessary to ensure their journey to the afterlife is smooth and swift. During the funeral ceremony, the buffalo will be paraded around in front of the crowd and will be made to perform feats of strength, slamming their horns together and fighting to showcase how important the deceased is. After the spectacle is over and the funeral's master of ceremonies has made a speech, the throats of the buffalo will be cut and the animals will bleed out in front of the crowd. Once dead, the heads of the buffalo will be removed and lined up as a display of the dead person's status, and the animal's meat will be butchered and distributed to the deceased's family and friends so they can feast in honor of the dead. On the final day of the funeral celebrations, the deceased is ceremoniously carried on the shoulders of their young male relatives to their final cliffside resting place. Taraja tombs are typically carved into the side of a cliff, and the higher up a loved one is buried, the higher their status. Higher caste families often have their own private ancestral funeral towers to signify their status and importance. These extravagant stone towers are built by craftsmen who specialize in tomb construction without the use of any climbing or safety gear, which is quite impressive considering that these funeral towers can be as high as 100 feet tall. Family members will leave gifts for the deceased or place the dead person's favorite belongings alongside them in their coffin. Elaborate bamboo effigies called tau are placed on a balcony in front of the tomb in honor of the dead person. It often costs a small fortune to have these detailed tokens made in the image of the deceased, and since grave robbery is a sadly common problem at Taraja tombs, these expensive effigies are often kept at home instead. Finally, the deceased is laid to rest in their tomb, and having been properly celebrated and adequately prepared for the journey, they can finally begin the passage into the afterlife. The Taraja value all life, from the oldest elder to the smallest child, and when a baby dies, they're celebrated and shepherded to the afterlife with similar ceremony and reverence. If a baby dies before it's old enough to have its teeth come in, it's buried in a special hollowed-out tree alongside other infants who have passed into the afterlife. These baby trees are believed to absorb the spirit of the children buried within it as it grows, allowing them to live on after death. Reverence for the dead doesn't end after the funeral's over and they've been laid to rest in their tomb. The Taraja have another important ritual called manena to continue to honor their dead long after the funeral rites have taken place. Every 1 to 3 years, during usually the dry month of August, families will gather in crowds at their ancestral tombs to pay their respects to their deceased relatives in a very tangible way. The Taraja don't simply visit the tombs of their dead relatives, they actually interact with the deceased themselves. The dead are removed from their tombs so that the tomb can be swept and cleaned, and their bodies are removed from their coffins to be inspected for decay. A well-preserved body is seen as a blessing in Taraja culture. As the tomb is being cleaned, the body is laid out in the sun to dry before family members methodically clean the corpse, carefully brushing away any dirt, treating any signs of decay, and removing any bugs by hand. Once the family has dressed the corpse in a fresh suit of clothing, they spend time visiting with their deceased relative as if they were still living. The purpose of manena is to remind the living to show love and gratitude toward their ancestors. For those whose relatives have recently departed, manena offers an opportunity for renewed mourning. During manena, a grown woman might be seen openly weeping as she gently strokes the decaying face of the corpse of her mother who died a year ago. A young man might be carefully sweeping the tomb of the brother who died years ago in childhood as his parents gently clean and redress the boy's mummified corpse outside. Manena also is an opportunity for younger generations to connect with their family lineage, which goes back hundreds of years, and to remind them that, like the ancestors they've come to visit, their own legacy will continue for decades after their death. It's not uncommon to see young Taraja people visiting with long-dead relatives whom they never met in life. A young man might share a cigarette with the newly cleaned and redressed corpse of his great-grandfather who died decades ago. A young woman might be seen taking a selfie with the mummified corpse of her great-great-grandmother after the body's been cleaned and dressed and propped up against the cliff wall for photos. Ultimately, Manena is a reminder to the Taraja people that they're connected to a long line of ancestors who came before them, and without whom they would not exist. Taraja member Petrus Cambuno perfectly explained the Taraja view of death when he told a visiting journalist, "My father isn't here," he said, pointing to his family's tomb. "But I am here, so he's not really dead. My mother isn't here, but I have daughters, so she's not really dead. My daughters have been exchanged for my mother. I've been exchanged for my father." Not all cultures look at death as something to fear. The Taraja people of Indonesia embrace death and honor their dead long after they've left this earth. They even live with dead people for years before sending them into the afterlife, and they continue to visit the decaying bodies of their deceased ancestors for decades after their death, believing that our loved ones never truly leave us. If you thought this video was fascinating, be sure to check out our other videos, like this video called Strange Customs Around the World That Are Still Happening. Or perhaps you'll like this other video. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.